Great. Thanks so much, Taryn. I'm going to introduce Gene Smith. He is a former student athlete, player, and coach, currently the athletic director at The Ohio State University, where he has done that for 19 years. Big focus on academic, athletic, and social growth. He manages over 100 or 1,000 student athletes kind of in the 36 sports that they do. Big emphasis on recruitment to career. 94% of graduating seniors secure jobs. Graduate school or go to pro sports. He has been instrumental in the Eugene D. Smith Leadership Institute, which really has a big focus on character, leadership, and career development programs. Not to be all like it's his also business, record-setting third-party agreements with brands like Nike, Learfield, Levy, and Coke. He's raised over 150 million for the construction of facilities. Schumacher Complex, Covelli Arena, Jennings Wrestling Center, Ty Tucker Tennis Center, Lacrosse Stadium. He's the leader of Ohio State's Business Advancement Unit, overseeing various entities. And most importantly, he's a first-class servant leader. I've had the privilege of knowing him for, I guess, 22 years now, and I've learned so much from him. I am really happy that there's young people, old colleagues on this call, and I'm really excited for what Gene's going to share. I could go on and on about him forever, but without further ado, Gene, thanks so much for joining us, and we really appreciate you being here because we know you are one busy person.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's my honor, my privilege to have a chance to share some things with people who are passionate and love sport. So I appreciate that opportunity. I know in the United States we're structured significantly different than Canada, but there's some elements that are crossover. So look forward to the opportunity to share some things.
Awesome. And for those who are joining us, please, this will be recorded, as Terrence said, so you can get a copy of the recording. But please really take the opportunity to ask any questions or put any questions into the chat box, except for tickets for anything. We're not doing that today. But we do want to hear any questions that you have. And we're going to start off. We're talking about culture, and listen, there should be, given the landscape of the Canadian sports system, everyone here knows that there should be thousands of people on this webinar right now gleaning this information. But that's okay. We'll start with the group that we have here, and then we'll disseminate it. So, Gene, can we start off by can you share a little bit about your entry to the Ohio State University in terms of how you got there, what you saw when you got there, under the lens of culture for us?
Oh, thanks, Matt. I've been blessed and having an opportunity to, as you said, be a student athlete coach, and I work in the private sector for a while, and I've been at a few other institutions prior to Ohio State. So we're all the total sum of our experiences in life, and so I was blessed to have some experiences that kind of uniquely prepared me for an Ohio State opportunity. My one of my mantras is the people. I believe people are the heart and soul of all that matters. We have 523 employees, and so first and foremost, after I took my time to learn the culture and environment that existed, I just wanted to make sure we created an environment for people to feel as though that ultimately they matter in a great way, and so. I implemented a number of strategies and tactics to get to that point. Behavior begets culture, and we started with a performance management plan, and that was really set up to allow people to set goals and objectives and be evaluated, but more importantly, for supervisors to sit down and have conversations with their employees. And my mission was to try and understand what everybody in the department wanted to accomplish. There's some people who wanted to be athletic directors. There's some people that wanted to be associate athletic directors in charge of event management. But we needed to assess what everybody's interests were. And then we needed to understand if they were passionate about athletics. In our world, and actually in your world in Canada, you have to be passionate and love athletics in order to be all in. Steve Jobs, I think, said it well that in life you hopefully you can find a career, something you love. Otherwise, it's difficult to persevere through the challenges. And so our effort was to try and figure that out, and then set up professional development programs for all the people in the athletic department, so that we were investing in them and helping them reach their goals. And that gets to that old quote by Maya Angelou that people will forget what you said and did, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. And so when you personalize the environment and help people feel as though you're really focused on them, you get much more out of them. And so our environment is a lot different because I could do that type of thing, be transparent, be authentic, and show that we care about people. Makes it a whole lot easier to create the culture. It takes time, takes effort and focus, but at the end of the day, this is about people. Everybody can say it's one thing or another, but at the end of the day, it's about the student athletes and it's about the people who work for the student athletes. So setting up that culture took a lot of work and effort, but I feel good about where we are.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. Two things I want to jump in on, Gene. Number one was you talked about the being a student athlete and coach preparing you for that job, but a lot of times we see people kind of the Peter principle in sport. You keep getting elevated until you're inept. Can you talk about the other side of that business development that you actually brought as well? Like in addition to being an athlete and having that experience, yes, but was there anything else that you brought to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think keeping the core mission, and you said it earlier in the introduction, keeping the core mission our focus. I never forgot what it was like to be a student athlete. I wasn't the greatest student, but at the end of the day, I remember specifically the lessons that I was blessed to learn being a student athlete, and then ultimately as a coach. So I never lost that. Our core focus is to develop that young person. If I come to any of you and we recruit and you give us your daughter or son for that 4 or 5 years, it's a big responsibility. You're entrusting your most cherished asset to us. And so I've never forgotten what it meant when I was able to get help to do certain things when I was a student athlete. And so I brought that with me. I brought that passion, that understanding. And so we talk a lot about that and our responsibility to developing the student athlete. Again, many of the people that I work with, in fact, out of our 523 employees, 57 of them are former Buckeye student athletes. And so that was intentional. And so they understand what it means. And so what I brought with me to your question, Matt, was a personal experience that I brought into the workplace. Besides my business acumen, at the end of the day, is for us in our country, it's an economic engine. So I did bring my business acumen, but that's relevant, but not relevant to what I really am passionate about. And that's what I brought to the table.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. And the second point was the assessment. So I like how you started with the assessment because sometimes we get into situations where the new person comes in and they're like, this is my way, this is what's going to happen. So instead of that, I remember we talked a long time ago, you talked about having a folder for each person and going to each person and really doing that environmental scan before and using that to inform the plan where a lot of times we might not do that scan and just come in and we've got our own way of doing it. We lose people. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's like me changing the mascot when if I walked into Ohio State, I'd get killed. But there's a great book by Michael Watkins. It's called The First 90 Days. It's a short read, but it talks about leadership transitioning into an organization. It's actually applicable for anyone going into an organization because what you should do is listen and learn and ask questions and be curious. I tell my teammates all the time that's the greatest time to be stupid because you can just ask stupid questions because you don't know anything, and so you just throw it out there. And so you have to take your time and understand the environment that you're in, because you can make a decision over here that might have a domino effect over there, and you have no clue. You have no clue about that. One of the first things I did, because I had never had it in my career, was to go and sit in our Schottenstein Center, which is our basketball and ice hockey and concert facility. I never had a facility where they played ice hockey and basketball in the same facility, and they had to change out the floor from ice to basketball and vice versa. I didn't understand what that meant and what it took. So I literally went and sat in the stands with my laptop and just watched our maintenance crew, our facilities crew, change it over because I wanted to understand that. But at the same time, it gave me an opportunity to get to know them, but also I could make a decision in my office about double headers. I couldn't say I couldn't sit in a room and say, well, we're going to play a women's basketball game at 4 o'clock and play ice hockey at 7. Because now I understood what it took for my teammates to make that change out. So I know that that's not realistic. Leaders need to do everything they can to learn the environment that they're leading. And that's the operations and the culture. And so that first 90 days is a great book by Michael Watkins to read. It helps people frame just what you're talking about, Matt. I really believe that some of the challenging things that we have in our society and in sport are exactly what you talked about. People coming in and they think they know everything, as opposed to assessing the environment. And actually, the other thing is using all the intellectual capacity around you. It's rare that I really make decisions. So there's times when I'll employ the democratic style of leadership, but it took me a while to figure out who are the best people to have in the room to help me make certain decisions. And so that transitioning in and learning the environment and is really critical.
Yeah, we've seen you do such a great job of that, and really treat everybody like they are a part of the whole engine. And you're bullish on establishing and maintaining cultures.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
you've
oh yeah.
covered it, but why is it critical? Just everyone, a lot of people talk about culture as a nice to have, but not the foundation or the anchor. We've talked about that, and I think you might disagree with that. It's really is the foundation. Can you
It
tell us
is.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's imperative. I mean, you have to have great communication, for example. That's a part of your culture, and so you can set up formal structures for communication, staff meetings, and all those type of things. But you want to encourage a culture where your values drive it. So first and foremost, I want an environment of integrity. Everyone that I'm blessed to work with and coaches and everyone, I have to trust them. I have to trust that they're going to implement what we need to implement to take care of people's children. I have to trust that they're not going to cheat. Then I want an environment of respect. I really don't care where you're from, what you look like, or urban, rural. I don't really care as long as you execute the responsibility that you have and hold our values near and dear to how you behave. And so respect is huge for me. So it's a value-based leadership, and I can go on and on about the values, but we have to have an environment where we can trust each other, where we can be authentic, where we can help one another grow. 44% of our employees are 35 years old or younger. So we have a significant turnover rate also in that group. And so, I'm 67. So, I have to listen and learn about that different culture. They came up differently than I did. And actually today I gave a presentation on resilience, and how I develop resiliency is different than how they developed resiliency. So as a leader, my recognition that exists that way is so important to them. And so, and the fact that I say that to them is important. So it gets back to this around culture. And it's really what you believe. It gets back to what I said at the beginning. I just believe that the best organizations are those organizations where the people care about each other. and they will, go to war for each other. 2 years ago, Matt, you know this, Stan, you know this. We had 5 concerts in our stadium in the summertime and 8 home football games, and that's a heavy lift for my teammates. But everybody was all in, and but we had celebrations along the way organically that I didn't have to orchestrate, and that only happens because you have a culture of care, where people say, you know what, the facilities crew in the stadium just knocked it out of the park with that country fest. They got to be dead beat. So let's do something for them on Monday after the concert. That didn't come from me. It didn't come from leadership. It came from within the organization. And so that's, it's important to me. I could go on and waste all your time about that, but it's the shadow of a leader. If the leader does not believe that culture is important, then it won't happen.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
leader
And
has to
so
do that.
great point, and dovetails nicely into the next question because I know there are people on this call who've struggled with it or are struggling with it. What do you say to people that either have people on their team that haven't bought into that culture or go into a team where that culture doesn't match their values? And that's kind of Stan asked a great question, about the alignment and personal motives and organizational objectives. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I transitioned into Ohio State, went through my assessment, took some time. I already knew, it kind of gets back to the Jim Collins book. You got to get certain people on in the right seat on the bus, and the right people in the right seats, and some people, then you just got to execute them. I'm just telling you, facilitate a transition. This is the hardest thing that you do as a leader. If you care about people, you got to do it in a humanistic and sensitive way. But if your culture and your team are not going to benefit because this individual is not going to buy into the mission or the culture that you're trying to create, then it's unfair to the rest of the team to keep that individual in the group dynamics. So you need to be a leader and facilitate the transition. One. Then if you're going into an environment where you're working with people who aren't buying in and you do not have the ability to move people on, then you have to have strong fortitude and come up with a strategy to help people get in line from the position you're in. That takes a lot of conversation. That takes a lot of effort. But if you really care about where you're working and what you're doing, then you're going to try and get close to people. Life is about relationships. I tell people all the time, if you want your next job, it's not just about doing your job excellently and being the best at it. It's about the relationships that you establish as well. When we're hiring a coach, I don't call the people on the references on the resume. I may call the equipment manager where he works or she works and ask, well, how were you treated? So having conversations with people, honest, open, and transparent, hopefully can change them. Sometimes it won't.
Yeah, fantastic. And what would you say to people? Like, obviously, that's why culture is sometimes a hard sell. What would you say to this group around that? Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to establish and then maintain? Everyone always uses the words best in class. Like, why is that tough in your
Yeah,
opinion?
because you have to first know that beginning to set up that culture is going to take time. It's going to take work and it's going to take patience. And you can't get yourself to a point where you're trying to set a date and say, I got to have this culture by this date. No, it's fluid and it's going to emerge over time. So it takes time. So that's one. And then two, the other piece that, people should never give up. If they believe in their mission, they should never give up on that mission and do everything that they can to get ideas and strategies from other people. I'm in my career, I've had colleagues across this country that I would call and get opinions from. Say, hey, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. You implement strategies. I know one of the things we do now, particularly since COVID is over, we do 3 culture surveys a year, 3 a year, and then we act on the feedback. And and it's totally transparent. We'll say to in my all staff meeting, we put it up there. This is the feedback we got, and this is what we're going to improve on. We want our communication in the department to be north of 85%. And so we go through each category. And so I don't know. I just think it's you got to be dogged on it.
And out of curiosity, what would some of those categories be?
Yeah, so communication is top of the pyramid. Do you, would you recommend working? Would you recommend to someone on the outside working in the athletic department at Ohio State? Would you, if you were being interviewed now based upon what you know, would you still come and work in our department? I mean, it's those type of things that we personalize, and we just communication is kind of my thing. Is something that's top of the pyramid for me. So I take that with a passion. But it's all those other things are more personal. We asked about, do you feel supported by your supervisor? Do you feel comfortable that you could share your thoughts and feelings? I mean, it's all those type of things, and we do it by unit, and it's anonymous, and we rate it, and then we put right up there areas that we have to do better on, and we'll communicate what the strategy is to do better around it. And then sometimes we'll pull different people together in a group to help us determine, okay, what do we need to do better here? What's our plan? So it's just a constant effort by the leader to make sure that the culture is moving in the right direction.
Always getting better. So net promoter score, kind of anonymous feedback. Two things. What would be, just without going too deep into the woods, are there certain areas that keep coming up more
No,
than
it's a great question, Matt. What's really nice for us now is the answer to that question is no. But right after COVID, that the 21 year and the 22 year, there was a lot, right? Because people were going through that transition. But ultimately, we got to a point where we've addressed a lot of the issues. Some of it was around pay scale, for example, in some of our units. And we did a full-blown human resources evaluation on 2 areas in particular around whether or not we were compensating people appropriately. And we made those changes. Because keep in mind now, when it all comes down to, at least in our structure, in our environment, you go to work to get paid. And then I say this, I tell this to everybody in our department. We want to compensate you consistent with the job that you're doing, consistent with the expectations. And if you feel like that's not happening, tell us. And then we go to the data, we do the national surveys, all that stuff, and then we make adjustments if we have to. Because remember, people go to work to get paid.
right?
And that's the core thing. And then beyond that, it's just a number of other things that, we just improved on. And most of it now is around professional development, because we have so many young people that we just have to constantly be able to adjust because that demographic requires flexibility. And so you have to adjust and find new and different things to help them grow.
Awesome. And then, if one other thing on that track, can you talk about the importance of transparency in
Huge.
taking those surveys and then going back to all the stakeholders and being open and honest about it, versus kind of what we see a lot in sports is we'll do it, we'll keep the data, we'll do the interpretation, and then we'll go from there.
No, it's critical. You people need to know a lot of different things in an organization. And so one of the things early on after COVID that was really a low rating was our communication in the department. And so one of the strategies that was recommended was that we have a weekly communication to everybody in our department. So I started every Monday, I do an email to everybody in the department, giving a summary of the week before, sharing some national information, and actually putting some data out. So when we host a football game, for example, with 105,000 people, I share the revenue that was generated. I share how much we generated in concessions. I share how much we generated in parking. I share how much we generated in trademark licensing. All that information gives our department an opportunity to see behind the curtains, teach them about the budget. And those things historically, we didn't disclose a lot of that. And so it's really important that if you want to develop an environment of trust, then you're transparent about as many things as you're allowed to be. There's sometimes I'll be in a meeting all staff meeting, and we usually get about 350 of our staff in a meeting, and sometimes I'll say, well, I can't tell you about that because the lawyers are in the room. So, so sometimes I get to that point, but 99.9% of the time, if someone asks a question, we're going to give them an answer.
Yeah,
That's
fantastic.
what's important.
I've had the privilege of seeing some of those performers, and I think you have more people in your tailgating outside than some of our national teams do for their annual budget, but that's neither here nor there. We have a good comment from Craig, or question from Craig along this track, talking about consistency. So consistency in culture, that's the big thing, is that being consistent. Why don't people uphold culture? They get lazy, they take shortcuts, they want to do things quick. You talked about patience. Craig asks, what are your pillars of culture that are non-negotiable and anchor the decisions when they're challenged?
First of all, it's our values first and foremost, and our top two is integrity and respect. So that's something that there's someone lies to me, um, it's hard. It's hard for them to stay on our team. And if someone disrespects someone, you can have a conversation and talk about why that occurred, and then you got to continue to evaluate that personality. So respect is high. And then another one is excellence. Um, we're about being the best that there is. We're not about being second or being in the top five. We want to be premier. We want to be the exemplar. And so we talk about that, and we provide the resources to the different parts of the organization to accomplish that. And so, and again, it's the shadow of the leader. It's me talking about that constantly and actually behaving that way in a great way. So for us, that consistent focus on being the best gets at your question. There's in us doing benchmarks and trying to make sure we know what others are doing. But now we're at a place, fortunately, where we're benchmarked. We're a lot of our programs are being copied, which that's what you hope for, is for your programs to be ones that people try and emulate. And so excellence is at the top of the pyramid for us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that answer. And Craig, thanks for that question. I just want to continue on that. Now people are copying you. We have this misnomer in sport, particularly in Canadian sport. We see it all the time where everything is, don't share. We want our little community team to be the best team. Don't share anything with anybody else. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a mistake. And if you care about young people and you want to make sure that if you have something that's working well to help them develop, why wouldn't you share that? It's because you want it to happen across the country. What's going to make me good and what's going to make me be competitive and beat you on the field of play has nothing to do with that. That has to do with my ability to recruit the best talent and develop them. But our strength and conditioning program, our leadership institute, all that stuff. If you care about kids anywhere, everywhere, you share. And so I we share our best practices in everything we do. Event management, marketing, strength and conditioning, our sports psychology department, our sports science department, all those type of areas we share. And I encourage my teammates to actually write articles to be published. And so if you're going to be published, then you're sharing. And so I don't know. I just think it's the right thing to do to across the country for every kid.
Yeah, great. We agree too. You talked about values a couple questions ago. Is that where you start, or is there a template to start? So I guess the question would be, for those who haven't begun, where do you suggest they start in establishing their organizational culture?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there's a great article. It's the 1988 Harvard Business Review. 1988 Harvard Business Review. If you just Google that on emotional intelligence, Dan Goldman, and he and a colleague did a study of the top 400 CEOs around the world, trying to evaluate what leadership style they implemented in order to be successful. And what they found was there were 6 leadership styles that they employed kind of seamlessly in different measure depending upon the business situation. But they found that these leaders had one thing in common, and that was a high emotional intelligence. They were very self-aware, they had great self-management skills, they were socially aware, so on and so forth. So it's a great article to look at. So I subscribe to the thought that you, as a leader, you have to make sure you put a stake in the ground around your culture and what it means to you and the organization. And so uh, the leadership style that is required to do that is the authoritative style. So after I went through my assessment of the environment and learned some things, I'll give you an example. We have 1,000 athletes. One of the first things I went to was a scholar athlete banquet where we recognize all those student athletes who maintain a 3.0 and above. We had 324 student athletes being recognized, and there were no Black football players. And that really pissed me off. And then I started to understand why. So that, along with a couple other things, when I had an all-staff meeting after I figured out the environment where we were going, I was very authoritative on what we were going to do. We were going to change the academic performance of our program. That's it. And I'm putting a team together to help us identify how we're going to do that. Because having 324 of our 1,000 athletes maintain a 3.0 is unacceptable. So I said that. And I said a few other things authoritatively that we needed to implement. But I didn't, even though I had in my mind how I would want to do that, I developed working groups and implemented the democratic style of leadership because people tend to support what they build. I implemented, and we were using all their intellectual capacity to develop the strategy to be better academically. So that also contributed to the culture growth. And so, there's certain times as a leader, you have to implement different leadership styles. And I would encourage everyone to Google that article and read those 6 leadership styles, and also read emotional intelligence. If you're not self-aware, if you have a poor self-management, it makes it difficult for you to be an effective leader. And it makes it difficult for you to continually develop the culture that you want in an organization.
Yeah, fantastic. A question in and around that is easier to promote from within or hire from out? Is a question for Owen. So with
Yeah,
what you're talking about in culture is sometimes I know we know Ryan Day's a good example, but sometimes you do have to go out and get the urban and bring them in. So talk about that.
yeah, it's what I started out in '05 when I came here, and then eventually in '06 when I did my reorg and started the process to build our culture. My effort was to try and assess the talents and skills that I was blessed to inherit, and then identify talent within the organization that ultimately could rise within the organization. And so I was really focused on that. It certainly would have been easier for me to bring in some of my boys from back in the day.
Mm.
But if you truly want to contribute to a positive culture and people see that other people within the organization are moving up or getting an opportunity to do what they want to do, um, it surely contributes to your culture. And I have countless examples now after 18 and a half years of people in the organization who've moved up. And I don't even have to articulate it because everybody there knows them. And so there's others, some who've become ADs at different places. But there's some people that I've told them, you have to go, because I'll give you one example. We had a young man by the name of Tyler Jones who was just phenomenal. He kind of moved around in the organization and became a senior associate athletic director. And the next move was to be a deputy AD. And I told him, look, you're ready. You're ready. But those two deputy ADs aren't leaving soon. So you're not going to get that opportunity. You got to go. And one of the hardest things to do is to tell that to talented and gifted people that you don't want to really lose in your organization if you want to be
Right,
selfish.
right,
But that story spread. And that's just an example. That story spread throughout the organization, and people were like, oh my God, that's awesome. Because I was doing what's best for him, not best for the organization, but
right.
what's best for him. And so, anyway, that's a long answer to your question, but
No, thanks. So on that, what tips? Because people struggle with culture. We've kind of dipped in and out of it. Any tips for those that are struggling to create the culture they want in their organization that you
yeah.
haven't already covered?
Well, I don't know if I mean, I think I've covered everything. I guess if you're the leader, um, and you don't feel like you're creating that culture, make sure you look in the mirror first and foremost. You have to assess whether or not you're the right leader and whether or not you're leading the right way. And that's not easy. I tell people all the time, Matt, you know this, tell people all the time, you have to find that one person that you empower, that you trust to tell you so they can tell you the God's honest truth about you. We all have blind spots. Okay, I got that at home and I got that at work. I got that one person. Literally, there's sometimes I walk out of a meeting and I'll ask that person, okay, how was I? Was I too forceful? Were my comments inappropriate? So you got to find that one person and you be vulnerable. You be vulnerable and let them in, and don't hold anything against them. That's one. And then two, you got to decide within the organization if you feel you're the right leader, you're self-aware, all those things, and you feel like you're doing the right thing. Sometimes you can get outside help, and I've done that. I've gotten outside help with speakers or different people to do assessments. But the hardest part is kind of what I said earlier. Sometimes you might have a parasite or two in the group dynamics, and you have to determine if those parasites are making it difficult for you to create the culture that you want. And the hardest thing when you care about people and you want to be humanistic, sometimes you have to facilitate a transition because it might be holding back your ability to build the culture you want. So it's first is self, the self-check. And secondly is, can somebody else help me get this done? But then there's that assessment of what is really happening. And it might be that you have one or two people that are working behind your back.
And would you agree that they need to be moved out
Yeah,
sooner
yeah,
or later?
yeah. I call it facilitated transition now, but they need to be let go. It just
Right.
sounds better when you say facilitated transition, but
Yeah.
you need to let them go. I mean,
Right.
you do. I mean, I remember I can go back to '06 after my 1 year of assessment here and think about the people that I let go. I believe that diversity in any organization is important. And that's just not in race and ethnicity, that's diversity and age and everything else. But in this particular case, it was one unit where there was no diversity, and he had 3 positions open out of 12. And I was trying to encourage him to find someone of color in one of those positions. And he hired someone, and then he came back and for the other 2 positions just said he couldn't find someone of color to fill either of those spots. So I told him, well, I guess they're going to stay empty.
Yeah. Everyone got that?
So at
Perfect. So
some point, you got to lead.
yeah, and I like what you said because it's common that A's hire A's, B's hire B's, so you don't get that diversity in there, and that happens a lot in our sports system. A lot. Everyone wants to keep everything all kosher and tight, and yeah, you
Right.
got that, the elbows and stuff like that, but it's really not where the growth happens, and you've articulated that a lot. One more question, and then we'll turn it over to the group who can ask you questions directly. We want to give everyone 15 minutes to do that. Is capitalism cannibalizing culture?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one. You have to watch it. And in the United States and the collegiate environment, it has to a great degree. So you have to make sure that from a leadership point of view, you keep your core mission and everything that you're about in the forefront of what we do. Um, we're going through change in intercollegiate athletics in the United States, and a lot of that comes from the commercialism that's happened over the years, and it's gotten higher and bigger. And the ecosystem we serve is different. So the commercialization and the capitalism in sports in the United States has really, really entered our space. So our model will change. It will change. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I do know that we'll be probably compensating collegiate athletes in some form or fashion. It just won't be their scholarship, but it'll be other things. And I've accepted as a leader that that's going to happen. When change is inevitable, you need to embrace it and try and figure out the opportunities that exist within it. But one thing that my colleagues and I have held on to is that we're still educational. The academic performance of our student athletes all across the board and everywhere has gone up significantly. Our graduation rates are the highest it's ever been across the country. And that's because of the rules we put in place and all the support systems we put in place. We cannot compromise that.
Culture. Yeah.
Can't compromise that. Even if we go to collective bargaining on our side of the table, you still got to finish 24 credit hours in an academic year. And be satisfactory progressing towards a degree. There's no wiggle room in that. And so yeah, Matt, it's I'm a traditionalist at heart, but I know that change is coming, and so I have to embrace it and determine how we maneuver through it.
Yeah, it's tough because everyone just wants that product and profit, but they don't realize that people, product, and profit will far outlast. And you can do you can have that triple bottom line and still last way longer, even though it might not be readily available because everyone likes to live right here
Right
where
here, exactly right. I tell our student athletes all the time, don't get don't get trapped in the short money.
right.
because all the lessons that you're learning, the value in your brand when you leave our little cocoon at Ohio State, that's the long money.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll ask on that is, $200 million budget a year versus $22,000 budget for a local soccer club. Any difference? Does it make a difference outside of the money? Everyone goes, oh yeah, well you can say that because you're 200, but there's inherently way more things to deal with because you're that big or that small. Does
Right.
culture transcend size of organization in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah, money does solve a lot of issues, as we all know, for us professionally and personally. But if you keep the core mission as your focus, when I was at Eastern Michigan University, a smaller program, we had a $31 million budget. We had 26 sports. So I had to be creative to create the life skills programs that I wanted to create for our student athletes. And I had to go to different parts of the university and in the community to find the talent to help me support that. So I think when you're looking at your financial resources to do what you want to do, just remember that the number one thing is the kids want to compete. They want to have a good time and compete, depending upon the age. And then, you try your best if you're really committed to try and find people resources to help overcome the financial resources, because that's really the difference maker in so many different ways. You might not have all the money, but if you got enough people that are taking care of the team and helping them be the best that they could be, because depending upon the age, it's all between the ears. Um, you got a shot to create a great environment.
Right on. Thanks, Gene. We're going to turn it over now. I'll stop asking questions. We'll go rapid fire questions. You can answer them yes, no, Gene, or as succinctly as possible so that we can get as many people answered as possible. Neil, do you want to go first? Because I saw you write something in the chat there. So you go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Gene, I'm athletic director, grades 4 to 8 in Ottawa, Ontario. Nice to meet you. And I guess I'm going to change my question, Matt, but it's biggest bang for your buck for creating culture amongst your teams. Like, is it having one team play another team in sports? Is it trips? Is it swag? We're one of the small budget programs, but what would you spend your money on, or how would you invest in your teams, whether that be time or activity? Anything that you got for great ideas that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, it's team building. It would be a team building activity. If you want to, you know, create a great culture, take your team somewhere and create an activity where they have to depend on one another, where they learn from that lesson. I mean, you do it in your sport, but when you take them to a ropes course or something of that nature, um, that's investing in them personally. So and that's to me, if you're focused on culture, you got to get them out of the sport and get them in an environment where they have to count on one another in a different way.
Thanks.
I just prompted everyone to ask a question now, Gene, because after you retire, they're going to be paying $10,000 on a plated seat, VIP, to get your knowledge. So now's the chance. Max.
Hey, Gene, Max Kenseth here. Really appreciate the time today. This is kind of a cliche question that I know a lot of people ask, but still something as a young person I like to ask. But obviously, what is like you've touched on a lot of aspects today, but maybe one thing you haven't touched on, like what's one thing you would have told your younger self starting off in your career in sport that you would like to that you would use today?
Yeah, when I was an athlete, I was 67. I was an athletic director at the age of 29. I was really stupid then, and I'm stupid now, but at 29, I have no clue. I would have told myself to be more humanistic and sensitive. And I think that that's really important. And if you want to establish culture, you have to, the number one thing in communication is listening. How many of you are married? Raise your hand. You know what I'm saying? The number one thing is listening. And it's not, you got to hear. And so I didn't do that well. I really didn't. And I made some snap judgments because I didn't actually listen and hear. And that's important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max. Anybody else? Owen.
Hey Gene, thanks for hopping on. I don't remember if I met you a few years back, but so I had a flag football game with Steele, so I've been
Oh
following
yeah.
along.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, my question for you is we've been going through the hiring process. We run a company, Private Coaching over here, and with the hiring process right now, we're struggling to find the balance between hiring based off of emotional intelligence and people, and hiring based off of their qualifications and their experience. So from you as a leader, and obviously with your years of experience, do you find that you prioritize one over the other when it comes to?
Yeah, Owen, great question. I do remember you. I'm spoiled. I kind of look for the whole package.
Yeah.
So, but I will share that one of my first questions to candidates is give me your top 4 values in life. And so that gets to the EQ part. And that what I'm trying to find is a person that fits in our organization as a person. So I put a high premium on that, and that kind of ties to that EQ. But you got to have someone that can do the X's and O's, Warren. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
so you really got to have the whole package. Now, there's sometimes someone may have a deficiency. I will lean more to your question. I will lean more to that person that's got the high EQ and an alignment of our values if their coaching deficiency is small. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely. No, thank you.
thank
Perfect.
you.
Couple more questions. Stan.
Thank you so much, Gene. One thing about sports we talk about is the ability to get people into a common objective. And for youth sports, that could be growth and development, camaraderie. For higher competitive levels, that can be winning. How do you get everyone on one scoreboard off the field? So how do you get people to focus on one objective that's bigger than themselves when some people are trying to move up the ladder, make more money, whatever? How do you get people on one scoreboard?
Yeah, I tell them the truth. I mean, if our assistants, for example, who want to be head coaches, the only way you're going to be a head coach is if you do your job excellently, if you differentiate yourself. And these are the things that you need to do to differentiate yourself. If the head coach is incapacitated, during COVID, if they got COVID and you got to take over, can you lead? Can you lead the way we want you to lead? And so you got to be honest with people and help them see what they can't see, but also give them opportunities to grow. And so that's always a challenge. And then the organization also has to set the priorities because you said 2 things. One, if you got a younger organization, with younger kids, you got to decide if you're just trying to make sure they have a good time and they develop, or if you're trying to win. And that's always a real challenge, particularly in the youth organizations. Is I've always subscribed that that's where they grow and have a good time and learn about themselves. The winning, it comes and goes. So I don't know if that answers your question, Stan, but thank you for the question.
No, it does, and appreciate you.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Matt, there's a question in the chat, a great question.
Okay. Is as leaders, we're forced to continuously show confidence in what we do. Is there a moment that you doubted yourself, felt like an imposter, the Peter Principle referenced earlier, or lost your way? How did you pause, change course, pivot, and come out of it? What gives you the source of confident energy when you need it the most?
Yeah, that's gets a little bit back to Max's question. In my
Give it a minute. I think we froze.
Oh, he's frozen.
Brett, how I did it. How I did it. And it was inhumane. It was insensitive. It was cold-blooded. And I learned a lot about people in that situation. I learned about myself. I questioned myself whether I, had the ability to actually do this. And fortunately, I at that time I was a crazy reader of books. I'd have 3 books going, one in my suitcase, one in the library, which is the bathroom, and one in the living room. And I'd be reading books. And I read a book by Max Dupree, Leadership is Art. And it helped frame things for me. And so I've had moments. That was probably my toughest moment. When you look in the mirror and know that you could have done better.
Perfect. Thank you. One more, Neil, and then we're wrapping it up.
Awesome. Thanks. My question's about underperforming teams. So you're overseeing obviously a ton of teams in your role. If teams are underperforming, at what point or how do you go about sussing out? Is it players? Is it coaches? Is it something that's holding them back and doing so, in a way that gets to the heart of the problem without making assumptions?
Yeah. So you have to have, that gets into management, different than leadership. So how you assess the coach and different strategies. One of the things that we do is exit interviews with all of our seniors. So we literally will ask them about their experience. And if they're consistent, and we do that one-on-one, and a lot of times you find something consistent, that they all talk about. The coach is not personable or whatever, and you might find something. The X's and O's are easy to see. You go to games, you have to be present. If you have a program that you're concerned about, you got to be present. And I will go and sit with student athletes at practice and ask them, stupid questions but all I'm doing is assessing the environment. And so there's not one thing when you're looking at a program that way. It's everything. It's the resources you provide. Are the resources you provide consistent with the expectations? For us, I want to talk to our trainer. To us, I want to talk to our strength coach. So all those supports people around the program, I want to get feedback from, and I'll do that over time. I don't try and do that like in one meeting, I'm trying to assess the program. You're doing it over time. And so that's a great question. That's what you do as an athletic director, as leaders. That's what you do. You got to make sure that the coach you hired or inherited is doing everything the right way to help that program be the best that they could be. And then you got to be realistic about your expectations. We have certain sports that, they're not going to win championships. They're not. They're going to be in the top 5. They're going to be in the top 10, and I get it. But then I got some others. I expect them to win championships. And so it's all about that too. So thank you. That's a great question.
Awesome. Hey, listen, Gene, thanks so much for your time and insights. Really appreciate you hopping on. Thanks everyone for joining. Great to see some young people in the group and gleaning knowledge. And again, we'll wrap this up and share the recording out tomorrow. But just want to thank all of you for attending. And Gene Smith, thanks so much for all you do. I don't use the word legend lightly. You, my friend, are a legend, and we get to share the same person that keeps us both accountable. So I know just how tough that is and how lucky we are, I guess, is the best way.
How lucky we are. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity. Let me thank all of you for being on, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night.